Welcome to the high side, low side finale for season 7. I am Spurgeon. You got my co-host here, Zach, and we have a special guest for the season finale. Alastair Fagan of 44 Teeth is joining us. We're going to discuss all the topics throughout the season with him. We're also going to do a quick look at a not the news topic around Honda road racing and what's happening in the world of Honda. But before we do any of that, we need to get in a word from our sponsor, Motul.
So we talk a lot on high side, low side about Motul's experience in engine oils, lubricants, that kind of thing. However, Spurgeon and I just went on a little excursion internationally. I wore a pair of leather boots that were not designed for adventure travel. I got them all muddy and gross. I came home to find in my care package from One Spurgeon Dunbar, Motul leather treatment. It can be used for boots, gloves, jackets, stuff like that, and slathered it on there, and the boots are almost as good as new. So a friendly reminder that Motul has things other than engine oil and lubricants if you're looking for those things. And of course, you can see all of Motul's products at Revzilla.com/Motul. That's Motul.
And when you're over at Revzilla.com, make sure you check out the RPM membership. That's the Riders Plus membership. You get deals across Revzilla.com, Cycle Gear, J&P Cycles, as well as a year of Rever Premium for all your mapping needs. Zach and I, on that little excursion we were just on, used Rever Pro every single day to make sure we were mapping out our adventure. And in addition to that, you get all kinds of discounts. So make sure you learn more about the RPM program over on Revzilla.com/RPM. But for now, let's get on to the show.
Alrighty, everybody, on to the season finale of High Side, Low Side Season 7, Episode 12. How'd that happen, Spurge? Who the heck knows how all that time was wasted?
My gosh.
It's remarkable.
We got through, this is going to be the end of the 7th season, and it feels like just yesterday it was the start of the summer, and we were looking forward to a whole warm riding season. We took some time off. We rode some adventure bikes, and here we are, end of the summer, wrapping up another season. Talking to someone that I think we both know and respect in the industry as our finale. But before we do that, we have to kind of talk about Honda road racing and the potential decline of what we're seeing.
So Lance wrote an article on Common Tread called "The Dramatic Decline of Honda Road Racing," pointing out some of the interesting statistics and things that have been going wrong over at Honda, which historically isn't the case. And we thought that would be a good thing to chew on, especially for a season finale episode.
Yeah.
So remind the ladies and gentlemen what the whole story is there.
So
Rich.
yeah, if you want to read the entire article, Lance did a really good job of kind of putting a look together on the past 15, 20, almost 30 odd years of Honda road racing. The article ran on July 26th, so possibly a little bit dated by the time you read this. But what we like to do with Not the News is give more of an evergreen topic to chew on, and this is definitely one that's evergreen. Lance starts off by looking at Grand Prix racing in 1997 for Honda, and the fact that they pretty much just swept the entire board. He then gets into Marquez's rise to modern era MotoGP and what Marquez did for Honda. But then he talks about the fact that Honda's not winning anymore. Honda's not been winning. He draws comparisons between Honda and Ducati and the on-rideable Ducati that was, of yesteryear, and how Ducati has changed what they were doing. So I guess, what I'd like to do is I'd like to start the timer with a throw to you, Zach, as somebody that is, probably more up-to-date on MotoGP than myself. What do you think is happening with Honda right now? Like, what do you think their chances are for success in the future? Do you think it is the bike and Marquez is the only one that can tame this bike, much like we saw with Ducati in the past? What do you think's happening?
Well, it's a big question there. I think. Well, I guess I feel like the reason that we think that this is just to back up just a little bit. The reason we think this is such an interesting, not the news topic, is that there isn't an obvious solution, right? Like, this is a situation where the largest and sort of most prominent motorcycle manufacturer and hugely successful, as Lance points out in the article, motorcycle manufacturer in World Championship road racing historically is like floundering and struggling. So what does Goliath do when it's cornered? Well, it's an interesting, like, if a motorcycle company, like when Ducati was struggling in MotoGP, and they could, and, you know, the bike didn't work very well, and people couldn't win on it. In some ways, it's easier, right, to say like, well, you know, Ducati's not Honda; they're not spending $100 million on a chassis or something like that. They don't have that kind of like figurative horsepower. But in this case, Honda has always just sort of like fixed the problem with money or been able to leverage some resource or another to make it work. And not evidently that's not working right now. And so the question is, what do you do when you have all of the resources in the world? Do you use all those resources, or do you like come up with a different tactic? Like Ducati has been doing really well in MotoGP, and they're a smaller company. So is it better to not be a Goliath? Is it better to, you know, skim down the team and try to do work in a more agile way on smaller problems rather than try to have this broad scope effect? I'm not really sure what the answer is, but I do think that ultimately, to answer your question, what's going on is it feels like Honda, and maybe to a lesser extent Yamaha, but similarly, are victims of their own hubris. They have so much belief in the process of what they've always done, and it's not working anymore, and they're not changing direction fast enough. That's what seems to be the case.
And do you think the direction is the motorcycle? Like, you know, one of the comparisons that Lance makes is that up until, you know, Ducati, because Ducati revamped their bike that they were riding, right? And
Sure.
You basically have seen Marquez, you know, who was just crushing it on the Hondas with the new era of the bikes that Ducati has put out. Marquez is riding the Hondas as hard as he can to try and keep up with the Ducatis, and is crashing and getting injured. And that's kind of the theme, is that all of these Honda riders are riding the bike as hard as they can to the point of getting injured. Oh, the alarm is going off. But I let's wrap it up with, do you think that, one, do you think this is a bike issue where Honda just needs to take a look at the bike? And then two, do you think Honda is going to stay in road racing, or do you think they're going to follow Kawasaki and Suzuki and maybe exit road racing?
Big question. So first question, yes, I think it's a thing it's a mechanical thing. They got to work on the bike. And Honda has for the past few years now has been blamed for just leaning on the accolades of Marc Marquez and saying like, well, our bike's good enough for him to ride it well enough to beat everyone else, so that's as good as it needs to be. And then when he got injured in 2020, I think it was, then, you know, all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's not going to work because our superstar can't ride the bike anymore. And now no one else can ride the bike, and they're the only ones riding it because he's hurt. So now we look like fools. So ultimately, yes, I think that the thing that Ducati seems to have done well is make a bike that lots of different people can ride fast. And that has led to success. So yeah, I do think that Honda needs to revamp the machine ultimately. And that's why the question is so interesting, right? Like, how do you just throw NASA amounts of money at it, or do you try to hire one genius person away from Ducati to fix I'm not sure what the answer is.
And do you think Honda's going to stay with road racing?
I do. I don't think Honda's going to quit. I think the company is too invested and too into it. It's just, and part of that is maybe part of it's just me being a road racing fan and thinking, I can't imagine World Championship road racing, whether it's World Superbike or MotoGP or whatever, without Honda. It just doesn't feel right.
Another major
hope springs eternal, I guess.
another major road racing fan is our guest today, Alastair.
Indeed.
So we've blown past our 3-minute time limit for Not the News because we make up the rules, we break the rules. But I would like to get Alastair onto the program, and maybe we'll start off by positioning the same question to him and see what he thinks of the future for Honda road racing. But without any further ado, Alastair Fagan, ladies and gentlemen. Alastair Fagan, everybody, welcome to the podcast. I know that you and Zach know each other, but this is our first time meeting in person. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's been a long time coming.
So, before we get into, we like to do a lightning round with our guests, but before we get into that, is there any dirt on Zach that we should know about that you want to spill for the audience?
I mean, there's lots of press launches we've been on, and there's lots of dirt that I could dig up, but you know this. I don't want to get libel issues or any kind of lawsuit. So let's just no.
I figured at the very least you were going to say he actually can't ride a motorcycle at all. All the photos you see of him on a racetrack are just photoshopped, and
that's the thing nowadays. Nowadays, though, video you can't lie.
True.
You can't lie.
You can just hit it to double speed though, right? So you just speed the film up.
Right. Well, I appreciate you not bringing any skeletons out of the closet there, Al. That's very meaningful. I'll try to do the same for you during this whole experience here, and we are thrilled to have you on. And our finale of every season of the podcast is basically to rehash all the topics that we've talked about over the course of the season. So we have a whole bunch of different random questions to throw at you. But as Spurgeon said, we like to dive in. For those who might not be familiar, I'm sure everyone on the internet is familiar with 44 Teeth and with you, but for those who might not be familiar, those living under a rock the past few years, we'll do a little lightning round here, throw some questions at you so that people get to know you a little better.
Sure. Let's go.
So very, very basically, how'd you get into motorcycling? What's your story that led you to two wheels?
My dad, he was a racer. He stopped racing when I was born. I don't know why. Maybe it was my mum. I don't know. Yeah. So then when I was 3 years old, I love bikes anyway. From the when he didn't stop riding bikes. He stopped racing. So he had some bikes, and I love bikes. And then I got on a Pee Wee 50 when I was 3 years old, and that was it really. Didn't look back.
And did you start? Were you racing that, or because I know that you have a son? You have a son now that is doing some motocross racing himself.
Yeah. I have two sons. Yeah, they're both racing. Wow. But no, I didn't race till I was about 8 or 9.
Okay.
So not on a Pee Wee.
Okay, but racing was a fundamental part of your journey onto two wheels.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, without racing, I wouldn't be here at all. So yeah.
Wow. Did your dad? Quick question about your dad. Did he ever go back to racing? Did he ever once you started racing? Did he ever get back into competition, or he quit cold turkey?
No, he stopped, and he helped me through motocross and then getting into road racing, because I'm sure we'll get to that later on in the show. But I stopped motocross because it was too dangerous, and I kept hurting myself. So we went road racing instead. And he came from a road racing background, and so he helped me through that sort of step. And,
gotcha.
Onto bigger things.
So you started motocross, you got into road racing, and now your kids are starting in motocross. So do you find that from a dangerous standpoint, do you find that just safety has gotten better, or do you find that it's just where you start with kids?
I mean, have you guys been in the motocross paddocks?
Yeah.
There's no real safety, is it? There's nothing. My wife, when I met my wife, she was in the industry, and so she came road racing with me and into BSB, into British Superbikes, and she got straight into the hospitality and the big trucks and the big semis, as you call them, and everything else, and then we started motocross, and she walked into the paddock. She's like, "What the hell is going on here? There's portaloos, there's no hospitality, it's grass, it's mud." So it's a very different vibe. But yeah, no, back to the safety thing. Motocross, it is what it is in a field with some mud, but yeah, road racing, definitely safer. Yeah.
Really? Okay. So that's road racing is safer.
This is you raced Isle of Man. I assume you wouldn't categorize Isle of Man as safer than motocross. No.
But I just mean in general with the medical facilities and everything else, especially at BSB.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, right on. So for those who again might not be familiar, you started motocross, you worked your way into road racing, and how do you spend most of your time on two wheels these days? Like, how do you spend most of your time riding?
I mean, this year is slightly different because I've made a racing comeback. I'm racing back at British Superbikes. I've had 7 years off. I mean, I didn't never say never. I didn't say I'd retired, but I stopped for 7 years because my boys both started racing, and they deserve the time and the effort and everything else that goes into racing. You know yourself, it's an all-encompassing hobby, lifestyle, career, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
This year back at BSB on the BMW F900 Cup, which is just like pit bike racing. It's hilarious. That's where we are today. And then also, obviously, with work, out riding most weeks. I don't really go out and have fun anymore. I don't really go out and ride. It's a bit more, it's a bit more work-based, all racing. And then if I'm not racing myself, then every weekend we're out with the boys riding. So,
right.
And
motocross, that is.
You mentioned, everything that it takes, and a few questions ago you had brought up your wife. Does your wife have riding in the background, or is she just supportive of this is what the kids want to do, and she's making this a family affair at this point?
When we met, she was marketing manager at Fast Bikes magazine, which I used to work at. So we met through there, and then she ended up getting a bike license, and she did ride for a bit. She did a bit of off road as well, loved it. But then when the kids were born, it was kind of took a step back, but she's getting back into it again now. So, but yeah, she loves it. She's a proper moto mum, and out there with the boys as well. And I've been away recently, and she's taken them. So yeah, she's part of the team, definitely.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's excellent.
So you talked about obviously, where you got started in motor journalism at Fast Bike. What was the inspiration for 44 Teeth? And for those of you listening that might not know, Al and his partner Chris, who goes by Baron von Grumble on the interwebs, you guys came together and created your own thing. What was the impetus for that? What was the reasoning for that? Walk us through it.
So, I guess the very start of things, we both knew that I knew print was dying, and I needed to make my future safe and be in control of my own destiny, blah, 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 blah. And I met Chris through sort of doing various interviews at Fast Bikes, and we just got chatting, we hit it off, got on well. And then he said, why don't we do something together? And I said, well, I'm actually thinking about leaving anyway. And Fast Bikes was being bought out at the time, and I wasn't too sure about what was going to happen in years to come. So yeah, we sort of had this vision, and an independent online publication hadn't really happened in the UK, or really around the world that often anyway. So we had this vision and set up 44 Teeth, and that was 9 years ago in about a month's time. And here we are today. So yeah, that's bottom line.
I think for me, I remember the YouTube videos first. Did the website start first and then the videos came afterwards? Is that like the progression, or was it, how did it kind of come together with what kind of content you were putting out there?
I mean, Chris was so video focused. He was the one that said, right, we need to be doing video. And I fully agreed with that, but my priority at the time was to try and make a decent website as well. And I reckon within about 2 weeks of starting, I'd soon realised that I was wasting my time and we need to go video. And Chris was right. He's most of the time, annoyingly, he is right.
So I have a question about print journalism. Our I guess career arcs are sort of like not completely similar, but we share some touch points. When you see someone working for a motorcycle magazine now, or you hold a motorcycle magazine in your hands, however often that happens, do you get hit with a wave of nostalgia and you think like, I really like this and I feel like I wish this was still a thing? Or do you think like, no, the world is right, we're moving on, why are we cutting down trees to print magazines? Where do you fall in that spectrum?
It's a split between the two. I love magazines, especially quality magazines with great paper and great photography. I think there's still a massive part in this world for print magazines, but the only thing is, having worked with digital, there's no deadlines. You can do what you want. There's no template. There's no limit, I guess. And
right.
That's what I love about digital. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Within reason.
That's fair.
Because Google doesn't like some of the stuff we do.
Well, speaking of some of the stuff that you do, the last question we have for you in this little lightning round is, a fairly simple one, though I imagine the answer might be more complex. What's your favorite video that you've created around motorcycling to date? Do you have a magnum opus? Do you have something that you're really proud of?
That's a good one. That is I've never been asked that before. I've got to kind of wimp out of this a little bit, and I'll just say Budget Bike Battle, the Budget Bike Battle series that we've done, just purely because that kind of not kickstarted, but gave us a big step up into what we do now, and it's launched the cinema tours we do, and other stuff as well. So yeah,
Can you walk our audience just like through a brief synopsis of the video series that you're referring to?
Sure. So Budget Bike Battle is originally me and Chris, and later on has been Boothie, who we employed a while ago, but I'm sure we'll get to that again. Budget Bike Battle is simply buying 2 or 3 budget bikes and taking them on adventures and doing stupid things on them and pimping them up, and then that's there's no other way to describe it really. It's that simple.
And it's often like the most recent one I remember seeing was like you bought like an old like 90s sport bikes, right? And then you rode to continental Europe. You rode to Portugal or something like that, and then back. Is that right?
Yeah, the last one was Budget Bike Battle Bavaria. So we had a 5-blade, 94 5-blade, and a YZF 750 Pinky, and then rode to Oktoberfest, which was just bonkers. Have you guys been?
Have not. No.
In Germany, no.
Yes.
No.
Yeah. No. It needs to be done.
Okay.
So when you do these videos, just kind of rounding out the lightning round, when you do these videos, is it just you and Chris, or do you have a small production crew that goes with you, or what's the scale of your productions at this point in time?
I mean, a lot of people, and I guess this is a good thing. A lot of people assume we have a big production crew and lots of budget, and in fact, it's just us and one camera guy in a van called Chlamydia Sam. And he comes along and
I assume we don't need to ask why you call him that. Yeah, it seems pretty clear.
No.
Yeah. Okay.
But he's known as that in the world of 44 Teeth. So, it's literally just us and cameraman Sam. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that is like you said. I think that's ultimately that's a huge compliment, right? When people say exactly. How you must have had a half dozen people and 3 camera cars and blah blah blah. And you're like, no, it's just a few of us.
Yeah,
that's cool.
We're running on 4 hours of sleep and a lot of coffee.
Yeah.
Right, and 1 STD evidently.
Yeah. So it's late nights in the van, Zach. So what we're going to do now is we're going to walk you through, and this is for the audience's information as well. So what we like to do with the season finale is we bring on a guest and we walk through one major theme from each of the episodes throughout the season, and we get your take on the different topics that we've discussed so far. And this is the finale of season 7. So we kicked off this year with episode 1 talking about our favorite motorcycles that were released throughout the previous year. So as it stands right now, we would be looking back at any motorcycle released in 2023 or towards the tail end of 2022 as the kind of ground rules. So our question to you, sir, is of the motorcycles released in the past 12 months, do you have a favorite? What is it and why?
So, I mean, I'm a sports bike nut through and through, super bike nut. I love racing. I love fairings. I love wings. Dare I say it? But there's one bike I rode recently, which, and I guess this is this might cheat the system a little bit, but the Desert X, because I know it came out the year before, but. Was it late 21? Was it or early 22?
Well, we did the press launch in Italy in May of 2022, but I don't think it was. Yeah. I don't think it was released for purchase until the end of the season. So, we can give it to you. Yeah, we can give it to you.
Yeah, that counts absolutely.
I mean, look, I love adventure bikes as well, but having ridden that Desert X ridden the Desert X recently, I was just blown away by what that bike can do. I mean, it is just bonkers. From environment and surface to surface, it doesn't matter what you're doing and where you are, it performs. I mean, look, I'm not saying it's not good on motorways. It's not good above 70 mile an hour if you're, unless you have a bigger screen on it. But I was blown away what that bike can do.
Interesting. So, and it's funny you said, because it's not the, it's not the biggest, baddest bike on the block, right? Like, it doesn't have the most horsepower. It doesn't. And it is interesting that you liked it so much, evidently. I also really enjoyed that bike. Spurgeon is more of an off-road focused rider historically, and he's like more sort of like adventure focused in his experience and his knowledge base. And he liked it a little bit less. I'm wondering if you think that the Desert X is like the road rider's adventure bike? You know, like, does it do things well? Did you find yourself liking the things that it did on the street better than in the dirt, or did you find like it was just? It sounds like you maybe liked it on any given surface, and I'm sort of curious how that broke down in your mind.
Well, we did. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the North Coast 500 in Scotland.
No.
So it's a 500-mile route, funnily enough, around the north coast of Scotland, funnily enough. But it's got, I mean, the terrain is a mixture of, kind of 70-mile-an-hour tarmac roads and single-track dirt stuff. And it didn't matter what you were on, the bike just, its consistency and its fun factor and performance at the end of the day, it just excelled everywhere I rode it. And that's what surprised me. Again, Chris, who wrote it as well, he has not come from an off-road background. He's very much two wheels on the ground. Well, sometimes, unless he's doing silly stuff, but two wheels on the ground, on tarmac, and very much of a road background. And he said exactly the same thing. So yeah, I guess it could be perceived as a more road riders thing. I don't know. That's a good. I never really thought about it like that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that Zach and I discussed, I'm much more of an American-sized hefty rider, and I struggled a lot with the suspension, just trying to getting it where I liked it. We were the only Americans invited to a European press launch, and I feel like the bikes were set up probably a little more for svelte-sized Italian men than myself. But the one thing that I talked to Zach about, at least in America, is that from a pricing standpoint, while I think the Desert X is a really competent motorcycle, and especially considering this is Ducati's first proper 21-inch front wheel adventure bike in a modern era, it's still north of like $22,000, in America. And I think for me, when I look at that price point, it's now playing at a level where you could be looking at, you might be price shopping that against something like a 1290 Super Adventure R, or you might be pricing that against a BMW, 1250 GS. And I think that was my only real dilemma when it came to the Ducati, was you're taking this middleweight adventure bike, but you're pricing it up against some of the larger scale competition.
Yeah, I guess you guys may be familiar with what I'm about to say, but as a journalist, sometimes the price factor goes out the window a little bit.
Because you're not writing a check for it. You're just beating the shit out of it and handing it back over.
Exactly. I'm guilty of it. I tell you what, I'm guilty of it. But I will say is, a lot of our stuff is dynamics and rider specific and performance based. Not, if people want to moan about the price, that's up to them. If they can't afford it, if they don't like the look of it, that's up to them. But our job is to kind of bring a dynamic review. So that's I guess I completely agree with what you're saying though.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and I'm sometimes caught in two minds with that outlook, right? Of sort of like, I don't really know or care how much it costs, and sometimes I feel guilty, like, oh, good point. No wonder I like it. It's $20,000, and then other times I think, like you just said, I'm telling you whether or not it's good. I don't know how much money you have. Like maybe $20,000 is nothing to you. I don't know who I'm talking to exactly. So I think that can be a tricky balance. But it's interesting though. I do think
that comes into play though, right? Because like Zach and I just got a chance to ride some small displacement bikes for a certain manufacturer, and like part of the conversation was like, how good are the bikes? Well, are the bikes $6,000 good? Or are the bikes $20,000 good? So I do think when you're trying to come up, at least in my humble opinion, like price does come into factor if you're reviewing a $7,000 motorcycle and how you're going to hold it accountable versus how you're holding accountable, a $22,000 motorcycle.
Well, I think the big takeaway here is that I liked the Desert X and Al liked the Desert X and you didn't so much. So you're outvoted 2-1. So
I can't win.
That's where it goes. Yeah. That's a good call out, especially for someone with a that's often road race focused, as you said, Al. It's interesting that you like that bike so much.
Yeah, and I feel a bit guilty saying it and admitting it, but because, again, this is another a bigger story to talk about. But super bikes and sports bikes, they haven't really developed that much in recent years, and I guess I mean, I'm not saying the Desert X is a groundbreaking technology at all. It's not. It's taken a very simple platform and turned it into an off-road bike, but it's worked. So.
Well, just based on your
enough.
background, obviously you have such a long history with road racing. Is there anything out there right now that does get your panties in a twist, if you will, that you're excited about on the road racing side of things or the sport bike side of things outside of the Desert X?
I mean, I love the new Panigale. I love the RSV4. I mean, those bikes. I'm growing out of, personally, this is personally speaking, I'm growing out of inline four-cylinder bikes. There's not enough excitement. And the BMW is exciting. The new Beamer is exciting, but it's not a V4. And same as the R1. We've recently bought an R1 with our own money as a project. And because, it's one of the cheapest, and it's still, that cross-plane engine is just amazing. Still to this day, there's not a lot of can match that sensation when you're screaming it on track. So,
yeah, fair enough. Well, to pivot a little bit for the next question here, which is centered around episode 2 of our season, where we talked to a fella named Sagar Sheldikar, who's an Indian motorcycle journalist.
Yeah.
And we talked to him a little bit about growing up in India, riding in India, Indian motorcycle culture. And I guess the question for you is, first half question. Have you been to India? Have you ridden in India before?
I haven't. No.
You haven't?
Sadly
Okay.
not,
All right.
no.
Fair enough. So in that case, the follow-up question is, what is a place that you've been internationally that you were sort of wowed by, that you were riding, whether it was the traffic or the scenery or whatever it was? I know you've traveled around the world and ridden a lot of bikes, so regale us with a tale.
I think it would have to be Peru.
Okay.
The Super Adventure R launch.
The 1290?
The
Yes.
KTM 1290, right? Okay.
Yes. I'm not sure if I could say it, but there's an American guy. I can't remember his name. There's an American guy out there who was acting like a bit of a goon.
Oh yeah, I think I know who you're talking about. I
Anyway,
don't know if we need to say the
we'll
name.
skip
yeah.
that. We'll skip that.
Yeah.
I didn't know, but it was just anyway. It just brought back my memory. Peru. I mean, the riding through these fishing villages, and there's no internet, there's no electricity, there's no phones, and these kids running out and seeing bikes, possibly for the first time, was just an incredible experience, proper life-changing experience.
Was that? I think that's the launch that Ari was on. I think
Yes.
Ari covered that launch.
Yeah.
Was he on your wave? Was he there when you were there?
He was, but I think we were in different groups.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
But those you rode a lot like sand dunes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah.
Bonkers. Yeah. And every type of terrain imaginable. But I've got to say, Morocco as well. Riding some of the old Dakar routes with Mick Extance, Dakar legend. That was, and again, the people and the nomads who have no idea, they have no passport, they don't know where they were born, when they were born, and they just up sticks and move around the desert. That was another cool experience.
I got to go to Morocco for the Tiger 900 launch right before the pandemic started.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
it was amazing to me that we would leave the hotel and they're like, oh, we're gonna go ride on the beach for a minute. And like the beach was in front of this old palace that was half buried in the sand. And that's just normal to the culture, where you're just like, I was sitting there and I'm like, I want to get pictures of the palace and I would do this. And all the locals were like, oh, that's just the old something that's buried in the desert. And it was such a culture shock to me.
Yeah, right on. Okay, so Morocco, Peru, those are the top of your list for
Yes, definitely,
Al
yeah.
Fagan's international recommendations.
Yes. If I had
Gotcha.
to say one, it would be Peru.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
what you kind of alluded to a little bit there. So Peru was a 1290 Super Adventure R launch. What was Morocco? What was the project you were down in Morocco for?
I've been there a few times. One was a tire launch, a couple of times for tire launches, but then I've been over a couple of times because originally it was Dakar training with Mick Extance. Do you guys know Mick Extance?
I do not know.
I don't think I do.
He was the most successful UK Dakar rider up until Sam Sunderland won it. I mean, the guy's a legend. So me and Boothie were down we entered the Dakar 2021. We went over there for training because that's the nearest and most suitable terrain to go and train in. So,
Gotcha.
yeah,
I didn't realize that you entered Dakar. That's wild.
yeah, it's wild.
What bike did you ride?
Well, so we did the Andalusia rally to qualify for the Dakar, and we used a modified KTM 450 EXCF.
Okay.
So we put the rally kit on the EXCF with the hope that we'd qualify, which we did for Dakar. And then the next aim was to raise enough money to buy a rally bike, proper rally bike. We didn't quite raise enough to do that. We raised enough money to enter and get there. But unfortunately, the Dakar organisers changed the rules about a month before we were due to go.
What?
Yeah. So, the rules was that if you were a newcomer, you couldn't do the Malimoto or the Motul. What do they call it? I can't remember what they call it. Basically, you ride by yourself. You get to the bivouac. You do all the work on yourself. There's no team involved at all. It's just you and the bike.
Gotcha.
So yeah, they changed the rules to say that the newcomers weren't allowed to do it. So that was it. Our plans were scrapped.
So what did they want? They wanted the newcomers to have a whole team then?
Essentially, so it was a safety thing.
Okay.
They didn't want any newcomers to be by themselves and do the work on the bikes, and there's so much involved. So
right.
I guess I see their point, but to do it a month before the rally started was a bit of a stick.
Yeah,
but, so we haven't given up on going. We're still, me and Boothie, even though he's lost a leg last year, he's still 100% in. So we will find a way to go.
Wicked. So I think I want to transition to the next question, which is completely off topic. But you've brought up Boothie a couple times now.
Yeah.
I'd like you to give a little snapshot of who that is, and the background of your relationship a little bit. And I imagine it might be a little bit hard for you to talk about, but his injury recently and how that's progressing. I'm sure that people that are a fan of yours would be curious to hear about him.
Sure. So Mike Booth, aka Boothie, is a racer, an ex-racer. Well, he's still racing, but he was a top national motorcycle racer in the British Superbike paddock and the TT. And myself and Chris were looking for someone else to join 44 Teeth. We needed a character, and he is one crazy Northern English madman. And he is, he's not wired up right. He's a left-hand thread. He's just bonkers, and he's perfect fit. So we brought him into the team. He integrated well, and it was all good. And he was accepted into the 44 Teeth frame as well. So, but unfortunately, he had a crash at the Isle of Man last year, and lost his leg. He was pretty bad. He was broke his spine and every bone in his leg and his foot, and ultimately they had to cut his leg off just below the knee. So he is, if there's a man to bounce back, it's him, and he has done. And he is, I guess I mentioned earlier, he's back racing in the British Superbike paddock on the BMW that we're sharing in the F900 Cup.
Okay.
So yeah, that's Boothie in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Epic story, an amazing story, and not the kind of inspiration that you always want to have, but it's inspiration nonetheless. It's super impressive, and it's cool. I've seen a lot of the sort of like social media upswell around, the 44 Teeth supporters supporting him and being interested and invested in his recovery and that kind of thing. It's been kind of beautiful to see, even though it was an ugly situation.
No, it's been I mean, look, I think we raised 90 grand for his recovery.
Amazing.
In about 3 weeks, which is just bonkers. And yeah, like you said, the support to see him back on a bike is just been. And I won't go too far into it, but a lot of most people will fall backwards on that after that injury and don't want to ride a bike or don't want to see another bike again. But he's just gone. I was about to say feet first, but he's just gone fully into it, and he's loving life. So he's good.
Yeah, I think
great.
I think it also speaks a little bit. We kind of touched on this in the very beginning, but when you refer to the Isle of Man, from a road racing perspective. It doesn't have, it's hard to even imagine or hard to explain it to people that aren't in motorcycling, what that really entails and the dangers that still exist in that kind of racing,
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that snapshot. I'd like to move on. I think this next topic will be one that'll be easy for you to talk about. Our third episode of this season was about Kawasaki ZX4RR, which I suppose might be a ZX4RR to you. Is that right?
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And this episode happened before the bike anyone had ridden it, which had just been announced, and we were sort of we chewed over whether or not this was like cool or dumb, basically. So now people have ridden it. I guess I assume you've ridden it, but even if not, what's your take as an excitable sport bike enthusiast on the ZX4RR?
Well, first off, I haven't ridden it.
Okay.
No one in the UK has.
Is that true?
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a rare piece of access that we have, because I feel like European journalists are always writing things before we do. We never get any access to them, so that's surprising that we've ridden it and you haven't.
And, and supposedly the European version is a bit spicier than the one that we're getting here in America.
Yeah.
So we're getting the RR and you're just getting the R? Or is that...
No, we get the RR as well. I think the main difference is with the US and Canada, there's a noise emission thing. So they trim the top of the rev band off, so it doesn't make any power above 11.5 or 12,000 RPM or something like that. And of course it revs to 16 or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's sort of it makes, I forget, 70 horsepower instead of 85 or something like that. And so the version that I tested that we rode here in the States is a little bit muted compared to the European market one.
Okay.
But it's largely the same machine as far as I understand it.
I mean, I love it. I love it. I mean, Kawasaki have been very humble in their releases. I mean, look, except the H2R and things like that, but
yeah.
For a company that is 6 times World Superbike champion consecutively, 6 times in a row, their sports bikes have been lacking. I know they still make the ZX6R, but so for them to drop this bomb, it was just, I love it. I think it's brilliant. The response certainly over here in Europe has been amazing. We've now got a one make series that's taking over from the Junior Super Sport. In British Superbikes, so there's going to be 40 of those lined up, 40 teenagers lined up on those things going at it, which is going to be, as you said, they rev to over 16,000 RPM,
right?
And to hear those things going around will be amazing. But I love the idea. I think it's brilliant.
So cool.
Who doesn't?
One of the questions that we kind of addressed in that episode was the confusion for beginner riders, because the Ninja 400 is a bike that, at least in America, is largely seen as a beginner-friendly model, something that newer riders can get on. And we talked about a lot of the questions that we saw coming in on articles were around like, oh, well, maybe I'll get this one instead of a Ninja 400, and kind of talking through the main differences and why that probably isn't going to be a good idea for a beginner. Do you see those same challenges in Europe, or do you think Europe is a bit more knowledgeable in how they're being presented with the machines, or maybe the way that they're more familiar with the different displacement models in Europe?
That's a good one. I mean, I think it's almost taken a stepping stone away from learner riders if you were into solely the Kawasaki brand, but in general you've taken away a lower capacity twin with less horsepower, and it is much softer and much easier to ride, or should in theory be much softer and easier to ride than the ZX4R. But then again, 75 brake horsepower, a nice smooth engine. I can't see there being any issues. But in answer to your question, I don't know. I can't see why the Europeans would be better educated or know better than you guys. Yeah.
So
maybe. I was just saying maybe
from
a. Sorry, Zach. Go ahead.
I was going to say, to hear you say it, it is more advanced. It is different, but you're not saying it's worse. Like it's
No.
back to the sort of price discussion. If there's a new rider who wants a ZX4RR instead of a Ninja 400 and they can pay double the price, then go for it.
And look better on it.
And
You know,
sound
it's
cooler.
all about looking good and going fast, isn't it? So
Yeah, okay. Fair enough. That's an
Do you,
interesting
do,
take. I
are,
like it.
are you saying that? Are you saying that from a getting on a racetrack perspective, or are you saying that as like a day-to-day riding the bike perspective?
no, I mean, I think from both. I mean, let's be realistic. Not there's going to be a load of these being raced, sure, but the majority of them will be road bikes, and we've been missing. There's been a massive gap in the market. You know, the NC30s and the GSXR 400s and the ZXR 400s. They've been missing for years, haven't they? There's been a massive gap in the market, and you know, manufacturers are wrapped up in the fact that sports bikes, superbikes don't sell. And sure, but that's because I believe that the technology's been lacking and the second-hand market is so good. Again, this is a massive. I'm just going off on a bit of a tangent here, but what I'm saying is these bikes. We've been crying out for Kawasaki, someone like a manufacturer like Kawasaki, to do something like this, and I hope other manufacturers will get involved as well, because you know, if I was 18, 19 and this bike was released, I'd be all over it, absolutely all over it.
Yeah, that's fair. And to be clear to everyone listening, the bikes that Al just referenced that have been missing, quote unquote, missing from the market for years now, we never really got. Like, we never got the ZXR 400 in the United States. We got the Yamaha FZR 400, but I think technically never got the NC30 either.
Did you not?
The VFR 400. No, a lot of those 400cc bikes never came to the United States.
Wow.
Which is
Okay.
another reason that it's interesting from our perspective, because Kawasaki dropped this ZX4RR and said, oh, you know, a 4-cylinder 400cc sport bike, and people are excited about it. And I think it's in part because a lot of the American market never even had those other bikes to begin with. That was not even so there's a lot of like pent up demand and kind of like lust for this kind of thing. So I'm guessing that Kawasaki hopes that pays off. But I mean, I agree with you. I think it's an amazing bomb to drop in the industry. It's cool. You say that you hope other manufacturers sort of take note. Do you actually, I mean, do you think that other companies would do something like that? That Yamaha or Honda, like other Japanese companies would try to match this? Or do you think they'll just sort of say, well, that's an area that Kawasaki's playing in and we're not going to touch it?
I think if there was a manufacturer to do something similar, it would be Yamaha. I can't see Honda doing it. They're very reserved and very safe. And although Suzuki have dropped a few little hints that they're doing more recently, I mean, I can't see them doing that.
So
it's a shame.
They seem too conservative. Honda and Kawasaki, sorry, Honda and Suzuki specifically seem a little too conservative for that. That's fair.
we do a little segment before you come on. Before
Good
you came
segue,
on,
Spurge.
we call it Not the News, where we talk about, you know, topical things that are a bit more evergreen. So it's not really a news piece. It's more about like what's our opinion on, you know, maybe an evergreen piece. And one of the articles that we had published on Common Tread was around the dramatic decline of Honda road racing, and really what we've seen with Honda road racing over the past few years. So I guess, you know, one of the questions that we had talked about, you know, throwing to you, and I think this makes a great segue because you're talking about how conservative Honda is when it comes to their actual bikes that they're selling. What is your take on Honda road racing 2023? Is it that the bike is a problem and only Marquez could ride the bike, and now Marquez is trying to keep up with the Ducatis and he's pushing the bike too hard? Do you think this is something else entirely? Do you think Honda is going to stay with road racing? What is your take on what's happening with Honda right now?
I mean, there's so much to talk about in this, isn't there?
I know.
We could
Whole other
dedicate this
podcast, right?
Yeah. I mean, look, HRC, the might of HRC, they're not going to quit. I can tell you that now. They're not going to quit. At the same time, if you put Marquez on a Ducati, I fully believe he'd just clear off. I honestly think he would. And let's not forget, Mir is a recent world champion. No one can ride that bike. No one can do it, and no one can do anything on that bike. So,
Right.
In short, it's obviously the bike. But I just can't understand how they got themselves in this state. It's so. And I'm a Honda guy as well. I grew up racing Hondas, motocross, and if there was a manufacturer to lean to, I'm a Honda guy. But it's just an absolute show. It's just horrible to watch.
And it's the person, our colleague who wrote this article for our website, pointed out that it's not just MotoGP. World Superbike is also like they're kind of nowhere in World Superbike, and that CBR Triple R, CBR 1000 RR-R Fireblade came out when it was last year, a couple years ago, and it was a massive step forward compared to the old CBR 1000. And it is from a showroom superbike standpoint much more impressive and much more dynamic and much more track focused and all that stuff. But they're not winning in World Superbike. It's the same problem, right?
It is. And I had this theory. I think it stems from the BMW, because the BMW, how good is that bike? I mean, that
right.
is, in terms of a road bike and a track bike, as a track day, just a ride day, whatever you want to call it. For me and you, that bike is stunning. And like you said, the Honda was a big jump. And although it's so good to me and you, for some reason, the Honda and the BMW, they cannot get those bikes working in race trim. They're brilliant for me and you, and then you look at the Kawasaki and the Yamaha, and they're the closest bikes to Ducati, and they're the oldest, they haven't got as much technology. Right. They're not as fun to ride, personally speaking. Right. But yeah, you've got that Honda. I in terms of a chassis and engine and just the whole package, I think is stunning. But yet it can't be ridden at 10/10 by the best riders in the world, and exactly the same as the BMW.
Right. So I guess back to the just to round out the Honda road racing globally conversation. What's the Al Fagan fix for Honda? They need to spend more money on the MotoGP bike to make it better. Do they need to like step back? Do they need fewer cooks in the kitchen? What do you think the answer is to make a Honda MotoGP bike that works for more than one person?
They need to hire me as a test rider.
I see. Okay, fair enough. Well, there you heard it here first. HRC, if you're listening, you got to get Al Fagan in the seat of that bike so that he knows.
I don't know. I honestly, it baffles me. I don't know. You can spend. I mean, I dread to think their budgets, but they're going to have to spend a hell of a lot more to fix it.
Right. Yeah. That's always been the Honda thing, right? Is just like spend money to fix it, but. I will see if it works this time. I don't know. Well, like you said, I can't see him quitting. So I hope that we return to the days of more evenly matched MotoGP grid at some point. But
definitely.
So
all right, Spurg.
Yeah, bringing it back around, and this kind of goes back to one of the answers that you just gave us around the ZX4RR. So in episode 4, we took a pivot from the Kawasaki and we talked about best beginner bikes. And we kind of parlayed this into an episode of content that Zach and I and the rest of the team produced. But we basically looked at all the different beginner bikes from different segments, and we talked about, really if you were a new rider out there, what bike would be ideal for a new rider. And I think part of this gets back into the question that I asked earlier around, do you think it's an American versus a European thing? Because, the roads are a bit different that we have here versus what you have in Europe. But really, from our perspective, we had a couple of different answers, but we're interested outside of, recommending a ZX4RR for beginners. Do you have a bike that is your go-to that you're like, if somebody came to you and said, hey, Al, I'm looking to maybe get on 2 wheels, what is your go-to recommendation?
My sort of go-to without even thinking about it is probably the MT-07.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Good.
That engine is sweet. The steering is sweet. And it's a bike that appeases racers, experienced riders, and yet complete noobs as well. So that bike it's got a special place in my heart, that bike. It's definitely ticks a lot of boxes.
Right.
Now,
and it's exciting. The engine is just so fun.
It is. It's true. So Yamaha MT-07, it's hard to fault that as a recommendation. We often lean toward the sort of like 300 to 400 cc category.
Okay.
For because it exists and the bikes are produced and people buy them. But it's interesting that you said I skipped that. You were like, just get an MT-07, which I don't think is honestly not that. I don't think it's that scary a notion.
No, it's not.
So is that what you find yourself doing oftentimes? Like if someone said, I'm thinking about getting the well, here we call it the Z400, right? The sort of the naked Ninja 400, right? The Kawasaki naked sport bike, the 400cc twin. If someone said, I'm thinking about getting one of those, would you say, don't bother, just get a Yamaha MT-07 because that's where you're going to end up anyway? Or would you ultimately recommend a smaller bike for certain people?
I guess there are lots of variables in this.
Sure. Yeah.
The age, license, that kind of thing. But as a whole, if someone over here in Europe, certainly in the UK, was kind of 22, 23 years old, just getting into bikes, then the MT-07 is the one. Obviously, if we're going younger, I love the KTM 390 Duke.
Mm-hmm.
That's the same context as the MT-07. The engine's sweet. Love the chassis. You can do things on that bike that you can't do on a lot of others, just because of how sporty it is.
Yeah.
And like I said, I'm a sports bike nut. I'm a sporty nut. I'm a knee down guy. So yeah, that's the kind of vibe I'm going for.
But it sounds like with your recommendations, whether you're looking at an MT-07, and I think when you're looking at that 300 class, I think the Ducati or the KTM is definitely one of the more exciting ones. Whether if you're comparing it to like a MT-03, for example, which would be the progressive step down in Yamaha's line, I can understand why you went with KTM. But it does sound like your background as a sport bike guy. It does sound like you're recommending a naked sport bike for a beginner versus a full kind of clip-on road race style bike.
I think the Duke or the naked bikes are way more versatile, and let's be honest, most of those bikes with fairings and clip-ons, it's just a gimmick, aren't they? You'd be better off with a set of upright bars and better steering, etc. So
right.
yeah.
In other words, you're not really giving anything up when you get a naked bike.
Exactly.
Yeah. Fair enough. Well, on the topic of recommending motorcycles, episode 5 of this season was something called the Moto Dating Game, which we do occasionally. And the gist is we present a personality. Usually people email in and they say like, hey, this is my name, this is my age, this is my whatever, this is how big I am, this is how much money I have, this is my experience, what motorcycle should I get? So we want to present you one of these people, if you don't mind.
Okay, yes, go.
You're gonna help them find love in all the wrong places.
So this email came in from Sean. Sean, I hope you're paying attention because you're about to get some advice from one of the greats here. Sean is a bartender. Sean's 25 years old, 6'7", 210 pounds. Sean's a big fella. Sean's been riding for less than a year now, has $15,000 approximately to spend. So a little north of 13,000 euros for those in European continent. Sean says, I ride in the city to get to better riding roads. The goal is to do track days eventually. Sean suggested, Sean has now an SV650X, which is the Cafe Racer version of the SV650. I'm sure you're familiar. So he says, should I upgrade that? Or should I get a Triumph Street Triple? Or should I do something else entirely? What is the Al Fagan take?
Sean, my guy. All of this, you were reading out, Zach, and I was just like, the first bike that came to mind was a Street Triple. I mean,
okay.
Yeah, Street Triple, all the way, 100%. That is, a lot of the questions that I get asked all the time is, if you had to have one bike to last you your life, or, what is the one bike, if you had to have one bike right now, it would be the Street Triple. And yeah, that or the Super Duke. So, but yeah, going back to Sean, Street Triple.
Do you have a preference between the R or the RS? Like when you think Street Triple in your mind, which one do you gravitate towards?
In previous years, up until this year, I would have said the RS all the way. But having the difference this year between the R and the RS, I liked the R on the road more than I did the RS. Very, very subtle features, but I just think it. And going back to what you said about money, I don't know. If we were talking track days, though, it's got to be the RS. So if Sean's thinking about track days, you can't mess about. Just get that RS.
Nice.
And for the I would just say for the audience, backing up a second, when we talk about the Street Triple, this is a bike manufactured by Triumph. This is a middleweight naked sport bike. The engine in it is a triple engine, a 765. And the question that I just posed to Al was, the R is basically like a very sporty package. It's got a great suspension on it. It's got a great electronics package. But when you jump up into the RS, it's even better brakes and bigger brakes. It's more suspension. It's extra electronics for the track. It's basically just one step up. And to the point of our moto dating game contestant Sean, who had $15,000 to spend. We talk about the Street Triple RS a lot because it's around $12,500 in the United States, which is a smoking, screaming deal for how much bike you get and what you can do with it, whether you're on the street or the track. It's just an amazing machine.
I didn't realize that's a really good price, isn't it?
Yeah. It's kind of.
Do they sell loads over there?
I think
I
they
would say
sell
it's a successful model, but I don't actually know where it sits. Do you, Spurge, as far as Triumph success? I don't know.
No, I know that because it's so affordable, a lot of times, and I talked about this when they first came out with the RS variant, like so many people just bought the RS. They just skipped the R because the extra money to get to the RS and the perceived notion of it was just that much better. But to your point, I think if you don't have any intention of taking it to the track, the R is actually the better, more competent model for the majority of riders that are just using it on a Sunday street ride.
Absolutely, especially this last model update. I mean, previous I would have said just get the RS, but now with this, with the technology, with the parts on it, and the electronics and everything else, it just makes sense that if you aren't going to see a track, the R is a much more suitable bike for the road.
Yeah, fair enough. So just one more. I don't want to belabor this because it's great pointed advice, and Sean knows where to go now. You do have a lot of experience riding and racing SV650s, do you not?
Yeah.
So I guess to play devil's advocate, putting a Suzuki GSXR 750 front end on an SV650 and hot rodding it, modding it out, turning it into sort of like SV650 hot rod for the racetrack. Do you get it? Do you get a little tickle of sort of like joy when someone talks about that bike, or are you just immediately like, no, Street Triple, it's not even close?
No, I mean, I honestly believe the SV650 is one of the best motorcycles ever made. I mean, its versatility, it's a wolf in sheep's clothing. I mean, I've spent years developing super twins. For those, I don't know if. Or the twins cup as you have in AMA right now with Ulrich's team Hammer, is it Hammer?
Yeah, Team Hammer. Yeah,
Team Hammer. Yeah. So James at JHS Racing over here in England helped Chris and vice versa, setting up with the SVs. And like I said, I spent years developing this SV650 to go racing, and it was just. It's bonkers what that bike as a happy shopper can do. Is it was a joy to be involved with.
Do you have a favorite generation SV650, or is it just the modern one?
The last of the sort of the sharp framed ones. Not the tubed trellis job. The solid.
Right.
Yeah.
That would have been. I think that's like the last generation of fuel injected ones before it did the whole Gladius SSV 650 thing, right? So it'll be like late 2000s, maybe 2007, 2010.
That's it.
Like that.
That's the one.
Okay. Yeah. Fair enough. Good choice. That's okay. So Sean, just to circle back to you really quick, you've got your answer. Get a Street Triple.
Yeah.
Al says you'll be happy for the rest of your days.
100%.
All right.
We have to check in with Sean in the year and see if he appreciates that advice.
Right. See if he's happily married.
But we are at the point now where we're going to give the audience a break from us for the next 60 seconds. We're going to give ourselves a quick reprieve, and we are going to jump into a ad from our sponsor, Motul.
Okie dokie, everybody. Thanks for taking a break with us. It's good to take a break sometimes. We all need that. And, of course, we got to pay the bills with ads. Everybody knows that, right? Okay, so moving on, Mr. Al Fagan. Episode 6 of our show this year was about what we called the Mount Rushmore of engines. Do you know what Mount Rushmore is?
I'm sorry. I don't.
Fair enough.
Sorry.
Mount Rushmore, for those others listening in England or Europe, is a huge mountain in South Dakota where we as Americans have carved the faces of 4 of our greatest presidents.
Okay. I should know this. I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay.
It's very navel
learning
gazing
together
for us. Yeah.
It is very navel gazing. It's a very American thing to do, to be like, look at these men. They are the ones that we should be thanking. Anyway, it is a famous landmark in the United States, and it of course it features the faces of 4 of America's greatest presidents. So our idea was to sort of take that idea of Mount Rushmore and apply it to motorcycle engines. So the idea was we would have eventually 4 episodes that broke down the best engines in motorcycling, and they would, in theory, these engines would be carved into a stone mountain as the finest motorcycle engines of all. So we did the first episode of this Mount Rushmore of engines concept this year, and it was about touring, motorcycle touring. And so with all that background in the books, what do you think the finest engine in all of motorcycling is for touring?
I mean, does it have to be a specific engine or a...
No, so what we ended up doing was
it does have to be a specific engine. Sorry to interrupt, Serge.
Yeah.
It does have to be a specific engine, but it did encapsulate different types of touring. But sort of ultimately, I think from your perspective, if you're going to ride from London to Istanbul and back or something like that, like which engine would you want underneath you? And it doesn't have to necessarily be associated with the bike. It can just be the engine if that's where your heart lies. But yeah, and if you're thinking through it in your mind, feel free to talk us through it.
I mean, I love V4s. I absolutely love V4s. And seeing what Ducati have done with essentially a superbike engine and turning it into numerous different sort of platforms for off-road, touring, naked bikes, super bikes. I've got to say, a Gran Turismo V4. That's mine.
So that's the end. The V4 that's in the Multistrada V4 specifically.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's got everything. It's got power everywhere. It's got that super bright rush. It's got excitement. It's got the noise. Although not a proper V4, dare I say it, noise. But
really?
I think it's yeah. It's not a screaming Aprilia, is it?
No, and because you're referencing the firing order of the cylinders, and that's why it sounds a little bit lumpy and a little bit different because Ducati chose to make the engine work a little bit differently than, say, an Aprilia RSV4 engine.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And it does have long valve service intervals. I know that as well.
Exactly.
So that's good for touring, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, if someone said to me Ducati would make a touring motorcycle that wasn't Desmo based, probably even 5 years ago, I would have laughed. But they've done it. They've done it.
Right.
We talked about, I forget what episode we talked about that, but we talked about the fact that, from a reliability standpoint, from a valve service standpoint, Ducati's really taken, their engines and their platforms over the past 15, 20 years and just done amazing things with what they're producing now.
Yeah. What was the result of that episode? So I haven't seen that one. Sorry. What was the outcome?
So we had gone through a couple different areas. Like in America, obviously Harley Davidson is king when it comes to long distance. We call them the flyover states, but you have the Great Plains in the middle of the country. So when you're looking at just cruising 800 miles a day down a freeway across the Great Plains, we understand, and we talked about the V-twin, the American V-twin enthusiast, and why they prefer that model. We got into sport touring bikes and some of our favorites for carving canyons. I was with you with the V4. I used to have a fifth gen Honda VFR. That was one of my favorite bikes for sport touring. And then we talked about adventure touring and the modern sense of touring where you have these adventure bikes that can go out there and they can ride on-road and off-road. And what we tried to do was we tried to think of an engine that would be able to do all the different types of touring
Yeah.
with vigor. And I think the one that we landed on when we really kind of weighed it all was one of Zach's picks was the KTM 1290
yes.
V-twin engine.
Yeah, that was going to be my next one because just bonkers fun, so much fun.
An absolute velvet hammer of an engine, just like smooth but also wild and just awesome engine. But interesting. I appreciate that you kind of like have a, have a tendency for V4s. You're like, well, I really like V4s, and if you think about the one that would be, the best for that kind of thing, that Ducati V4 is a good touring engine, undeniably. That Multistrada is like it's a comfortable bike. It's wicked on a set of curves, but it's also smooth, and so pretty good. We talked about the like the BMW inline
Boxer.
6, the K1600 engine. We also talked about the BMW Boxer. How can you talk about a touring conversation without talking about the BMW GS, which is like, obviously a good touring bike and it's a good engine. We talked about the Honda Goldwing engine, which is just incredibly smooth and pretty wicked. So a lot of choices, but I appreciate that your choice was different than ours ultimately.
Good to hear.
Well, I think it's interesting too because it is and I was talking this with our producer Chase during the break a little bit around like just the difference in geography when you're talking about touring in Europe versus touring in America.
I was just going to mention this,
and what you have to navigate and what we have to navigate are there are some different cultural differences there.
Yeah.
So have you ridden? You've ridden like a Harley Davidson touring bike, I assume, at some point.
Yeah.
Have you mostly ridden it in England or in Europe, or have you ridden a Harley in the United States?
So we came to Florida for a Bridgestone tyre launch, the H50, and we did some miles on lots of different Harleys and some other touring bikes. But yeah, I mean, it's completely different to Europe, and like you said, you could be riding for 24 hours without seeing the sea, which you don't get in Europe, really.
Right.
So, the variables and the requirements are just so different, aren't they? So,
well, you got to see the crown jewel of America, Florida. It's really one of our shining states.
Spurgeon's doing his best to alienate whichever listeners live in Florida, evidently. It is. Florida, the Florida motorcycle culture is interesting. I get a lot of messages on social media from people who live in Florida, and there are a lot of motorcycle ownership in Florida and a lot of motorcycle use in Florida, but not a lot of like twisty roads and not a lot of canyons and mountains and that kind of thing.
We found that.
Yeah, you found that. So presumably you, based on your facial expression when talking about Florida, you weren't immediately drawn to the American style of riding, just like riding straight down a straight road. It didn't really stir
Resonate?
a new emotion in you.
No, not particularly. And the Bridgestone H50 is a touring tyre, not a proper big fat white waller sort of touring tyre, not not to be twisty. But no, I've ridden in California, won the Pikes Peak launch, and did the Buell 1125R launch at in San Fran, which we found some decent roads. So I have seen both sides, definitely.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
that's good to know. All right. Well, the next episode we want to talk about, episode 7, we talked about all things three-wheeled, basically. So the sort of upshot of the episode was are trikes bikes? Like, are there three-wheeled vehicles within or just outside the motorcycling world that you consider a motorcycle, or like which ones are cool and which ones are not cool, that kind of thing? So I guess our question is mostly a cultural one. How are three-wheeled, are trikes regarded in England, and do you see a lot of them around? Do people use three-wheeled vehicles?
I mean, there's lots of sidecars.
Okay.
I don't know if that counts.
No,
really.
that counts.
That was part
Absolutely,
of the conversation. Yeah.
That was part of the conversation. Yeah.
So sidecars are cool. I love sidecars. We did a budget bike battle. We won. It spent most of its time on two wheels, but that's that's all good. There's a lot of hate towards things like the Nikon and I think a lot of it is elder gentlemen, elder riders who are stuck in their ways and they don't like change and they don't like the weird looking suspension and the fact that they're being overtaken around the outside by someone on an Icon or I think there's a deep lying hate for it, and it's the same for everything, isn't it? In life and society, there's going to be things that divide opinion and divide society, and the Nikon and the Piaggio MP3, for example, they do it. There's a genuine hate, which is it's a shame because that Nikon's so good. So good.
It's interesting that you bring up the Nikon and the Yamaha Nikon and the Piaggio MP3, both of which are three-wheel vehicles where the two front wheels are pretty close to each other, and ultimately they lean, right? Like you can still lean the bike over. It still acts like a two-wheeled vehicle. But
you said bike. There you go. You said bike. You lean the bike over. Yeah.
Right. You lean the bike over.
Yeah.
So, and it's interesting that you say that those machines get hate from people who are into motorcycles.
Yeah.
In the United States, there's a fairly large culture of say the Can-Am Spider or like the Harley Tri-Glide, right? So like, do you have Can-Am Spiders in England? Do you have Harley Trikes with two wheels in the back and Can-Am Spiders with two wheels in the front? And so are those people just like totally off the reservation? Like they're not even invited to the same parties or what?
No, I mean the trike guys, the old school custom trike guys. No, they're not coming to the party. They are, I've got to be careful what I say, but yeah, they're not invited. There's no way. They're a different breed.
Okay, interesting.
But the Can-Am Spider, I mean, again, it's quite a lot of money for a very unique niche thing. But man, I had some laugh. Where was it? The launch was in. I forget. The launch was, I think it was Portugal, and we just ended up drifting these things around Portugal, and I mean it was run by an agency over in Europe who had no idea about bikes, cars, automotive, and they just basically found some journalists, invited us over, and we just ended up riding like Muppets for 2 days, and I don't know how no one was injured, but yeah, I think it's a split with the Can-Am thing. It's a kind of a split because it's you can see they're going to be fun, but again, it's like, oh, that's different. Oh no, yeah, you can't call yourself but you can ride it on a bike license, can't you? So, well, you can over in Europe anyway.
Yeah. Well, we had talked about a little bit with this episode, the perception of, I think we're all looking at this through the lens of a motorcyclist, but one of the things that we had kind of touched on was if you're somebody that's only ever driven a car and you're looking at three-wheeled vehicles as a fun alternative to four-wheel transportation, then, I think for us, it becomes a conversation of, oh, does this count as a motorcycle or whatnot? But whether you're looking at a sidecar or a trike or two wheels in the front and one in the back, if you've only had automotive experience, can these vehicles almost act as a gateway drug, if you will, to get people, a bit more interested in something that might be perceived as dangerous by just jumping to two wheels?
I mean, I think everyone. What's that Honda trike called? The death trap. The
old dirt bike. The one that was on the
ATC 200.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, I think people look back at those kind of things and that reputation for trikes and go, nah, they're way too dangerous. Way too dangerous. So I guess I see the danger aspect. I really do, but. I don't actually have to forgive me. I can't. I thought of that three-wheel trike and completely lost my train of thought. Can you remind me of the previous question? What was
just like as a gateway, right? Like someone's like, "Oh, I've only ever driven a Toyota minivan, and I want the wind in my hair, but like two wheels is way too scary." So is a Can-Am Spider like? Does it make sense?
I mean, when those things. The bottom line is no. I would say no. I mean, when those spiders go wrong, they go wrong. Like if you have a bit of a choppy throttle hand, or you're a little bit keen sometimes, it's going to bite, and it's going to bite hard. Whereas, I think with a bike, I don't know. Maybe I'm just talking from an experienced side, someone who's ridden bikes all their life, but I just feel like when it's going to go wrong with something like a Can-Am Spider, it's going to go wrong big time, or in a bigger way, I think.
I have some amount of experience with three-wheeled vehicles in my life, and if one thing has always come to the fore, it's that they always crash in a sort of special way, a unique
special way.
And it's not often graceful. That's fair. So one other thing I just wanted to touch base really quick on the three-wheel vehicle thing. England has a bit of a history of three-wheel vehicles because wasn't there a time post-war when the like insurance was such that three-wheel vehicles were less than four-wheel vehicles? So this is what bred the whole like Reliant Robin phase, and like their sidecars that were completely enclosed. And
yes.
Wasn't there kind of a boom of three-wheel vehicles at some point in England?
I'm really embarrassed to say I don't know this. I thought you were just going to go straight in with the Reliant Robin.
Well, that's the most famous, like, because it's an absurdity, right? Like,
well,
if you see a Reliant Robin now.
Let's pretend that the audience, not that I have no idea what we're talking about, because I surely don't.
That's fair.
What are we discussing here for the audience?
That's fair. Would you like to give a Reliant Robin snapshot, Al, or shall I do it?
You go for it, mate. You go for it.
I know very little about it, but it is essentially, it looks like a little hatchback car. And it was made by a company called Reliant, which was a car manufacturer, an automotive manufacturer in England for some period of time. And the Robin was made in, what was it, the 70s, 80s?
See, I don't know too much about it either, but all I know is it's this iconic British engineering feat, and everyone loves it. I mean, they're just, and they are death traps. You know, you literally. Right. I don't know if have you ever seen Jeremy Clarkson drive?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's the thing that you should Google if you Google Reliant Robin is you should Google Jeremy Clarkson Reliant Robin. They did a whole segment in Top Gear on the Reliant Robin, and it's brilliant and funny. It's basically a little hatchback car, but it only has one front wheel. So it has one wheel at the front, and it looks like part hatchback and part shopping cart.
Yeah. Like a van.
It's a very it's a peculiar looking, kind of like cartoony looking vehicle, and because it only has one front wheel, and yet it has similar weight distribution to a car, it is prone to flipping over, which is something that Jeremy Clarkson experimented with a lot. So anyway, like you said, it is sort of this like famous British. I don't know. You call it an engineering feat. I would say I might have used a different word, like I don't know, some sort of infamous engineering disaster of some kind. But anyway, the point is, I know that there's some history of three-wheel vehicles in England that, like, that car was manufactured for a very specific reason. It wasn't because someone was like, oh, you know what the problem is four wheels is unstable, so I'm going to put three. Like, that wasn't the point. The point was you could evade some insurance thing or
license as well. Yeah.
Licensing. Okay. Yeah. Maybe that was part of it. Anyway, so I guess that's what I wanted to kind of like get your take as a Briton to say, like, you know, I'm surprised that there's no kind of like holdover for, like you said that, what did you say? You said something like elderly riders elder statesmen of the motorcycling world are the ones who look down on three-wheeled vehicles the most.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me that there wouldn't be part of that generation that would remember the three-wheeled sort of boom or craze or whatever happened in England and sort of remember it fondly. But it sounds like there's no remembering that fondly, really.
No, I mean, the Reliant Robin to me is a car. It's a car.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
Whereas the bikes trikes bikes we've already mentioned, they are of a motorcycling kind of background. Or I mean, look, I know the Can-Am is completely unique as well, but it feels it's more, you know, it's got levers, it's got handlebars, it's got, you know, it's very much more bike focused, or a jet ski on wheels, if you like. So.
For those of you listening, I'm doing some Google searching while these two are talking back and forth. Thank goodness
someone's doing some actual work.
The Reliant Robin looks like a Ford Pinto, but with just one wheel in the front. So that'll speak volumes to our American audience that it's old enough to remember the Ford Pinto. It was produced from 1973 to 1981 in the UK. So that was the main years of production.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And again, if you're not familiar, even if you are familiar with the Reliant Robin, you should watch the Jeremy Clarkson segment.
Definitely.
I'm sure it's on YouTube. It's hilarious. All right. So we should pivot from one awkward subject to another. I love that every time we talk about three wheels, by the way. Did you notice, Spurgeon, that Al did the same thing we did when we were talking about, you're like, you immediately don't want to offend people, and you're kind of like, well, no, it's a different kind of no, it's fine and it's good. It's just it's not quite.
We had a lot of people write in with that episode being like, you guys are idiots. Why would you even bring this up? You know, you're asking questions that nobody wants the answer to. But I think we did kind of land in the same place that you ultimately landed in right out of the gate, which was like, we look at sidecars, you know, and a sidecar is just kind of cool. There's a cool factor there. Zach obviously has a history of racing them. And we kind of, I think we ultimately finished was, if it's got a handlebar, like if you're sitting on it and it's got a handlebar, you know, then we can kind of throw it into it's a bike path.
Yeah, true.
I think, you know, ultimately we hemmed and we hawed. I'm not even sure why we drew a line in the sand. Who cares? Like, you know, we're trying to pick sides here, and you're only ever going to lose.
Yeah.
Anyway,
do what you want to do. As we move on to episode 8, which was an episode where we had Ryan Fortnine from Canada join us, and we discussed electric motorcycles. Obviously, there's a lot been happening over the past few years with electric vehicles in general, but within the motorcycle sphere, maybe it's been a little bit slower to take off than what we've seen from automotive counterparts. So I guess, you know, really getting back to the difference, you know, from across the pond, what are you seeing in England as it relates to the state of electric vehicles in general? Automotive, but mainly with a focus on two wheels especially. Are you seeing a boom in electric vehicles on two wheels?
I mean, I can't remember what we were talking about with the hate kind of thing, but it goes back to there's a lot of hate for electric bikes over here. I mean, you're called a lot of names. Most of them I can't say on the internet for riding an electric bike. And
so it's similar to the three-wheeled thing, that like it's similar to like ride. Is it similar to riding? It's worse. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, why is that?
Yeah. Why do you call them those names, Al?
Yeah.
It's not just me. I love I genuinely love the new Zero DRS. Is it DRS?
Yeah, DRSX. The
DRSX, yeah.
X.
The adventure bike.
Yes, I love that bike. I genuinely love that bike. Yeah.
Sure.
And if the world was to end, or the internal combustion engine was to end tomorrow, and we could no longer have it at all, even older bikes, then you'd have to accept it. But yeah, there's no displacement for upsetting Greta Thunberg at the moment, and generally speaking, electric bikes have no place. And this is not my opinion. This is the opinion of the English people. There's no place for electric bikes at the moment. And
really,
that shows in sales as well. I won't name the shop, and it wouldn't matter to most of your listeners anyway. But there's a shop here in England who is a Zero dealer, and they were told to stock up on these bikes. They had a good price, and they've got a warehouse full of Zero bikes they can't sell. And
are you seeing the same reaction to electric cars?
No, cars is very different. Cars are just, you know, they're a means of transport.
Right.
Whereas
it's an appliance. It's a toaster or a washing machine. Yeah. Right.
Whereas two wheels moves the soul. Blah 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 blah. It's a completely different thing. So yeah, I mean, also the charging logistics and the infrastructure and everything, it's nowhere near as. It's getting better. It's getting a lot better, but nowhere near as good as it should be. And there's. Again, tell me if I'm gibbering on a bit, but there was one time where I found an electric bike to be really handy, and I finally found a home for an electric motorcycle, and that was the trials bike, what's it called? Do you know the one I'm about? It's a French trials bike, Emotion.
Oh, okay.
Trials bike, amazing, absolutely stunning. On the flip side, the motocross paddock, anyone, if you are seen riding an electric bike in England at motocross track, you will be shot. I'm not kidding you.
I didn't know I didn't know you had guns there.
Yeah,
that's
I didn't
amazing.
think you had guns.
That's
There's
that's a very American thing to say.
It's
Yeah.
exceptions. There are exceptions to be made if you're riding an electric bike.
So
even,
like, are you? I mean,
Someone will go out and buy a gun just to be able to, just to shoot somebody. Yeah.
So just to like land on this for just a moment.
yeah.
You're this isn't your personal opinion.
No.
Showing through. This is like if you show up with a Stark Varg or an old like an Alta Redshift motocross bike, which have been widely agreed upon by experts to be good motocross motorcycles.
Yeah.
If you show up at a motocross track and you're riding around on that, people won't talk to you. Like you're a leper.
100%.
Really?
Yeah.
Have you had an opportunity?
interesting.
So one of the things that sparked this conversation at the end of last season was around some of the claims that Stark Varg specifically was making for their bike. Have you had a chance? I know they did the launch for that in Europe. Did you get a chance to ride that bike?
I didn't. I know I was busy on another launch, but Boothie rode the bike in Barcelona, and he's an experienced motocross rider, former national level rider, and he came away blown away by it. But you can tell people how good it is until the cows come home. It doesn't matter. It's especially in the motocross paddock. It is. I don't think you could do a lot more worse than to turn up on an electric bike. It's just I don't know what it's like in America, but it's it's a very it's not. I mean, there was a Facebook post. This just yesterday, a Facebook post from this track in the Midlands in England, very famous, very popular motocross track, and they took a picture. They posted a picture of a I think it was a start. It must have been a start because it was one of the first in the country. At the track, and they said the future has arrived, and it was probably like half an hour into the post, and there was the comments. I think it was about 300 comments, and every single one of them was like, "Get him off your land, close the track. I'm not coming back if that thing's still there." It's just mind blowing. It's just
that's crazy. I think in America we haven't seen wide acceptance of like people going out and voting with their checkbooks and saying, I'm going to go buy, these electric vehicles or these electric motorcycles rather. But we haven't, to my knowledge, seen any, strong animosity against it. It's just people saying, well, I don't know if the technology's there yet. I'm not going to invest the money. Do you
I'm
think
sure there
this
are
gets
places, there are probably places in the United States that might be similar where people will be like, no, like throw that thing in the trash. Maybe. But to Spurge's point, it's been largely kind of, like begrudging acceptance, I guess.
Do you think?
Spurge, sorry.
I would say, do you think this gets back to like the old timers mentality of like that's not really a motorcycle? Like you have to shift, you have to understand, your corner speeds, and you can't just rip back on the throttle. You have to know what gear you're in. Like, do you think a lot of this comes back to like that mentality of maybe it's more of an English mentality or European mentality in general of like knowing how to do the skill versus just having a throttle and going?
Maybe there sure has to be an element of that creeping in, but I think, as I talked about before, motorcycles are so emotive and so. Look, I got chastised because I rocked up with an S07E12 for my lad. We borrowed it from KTM, and they're brilliant bikes. Absolutely brilliant bikes, and
which is just to pause really quick. That's an electric,
yes.
a child-size electric motocross bike that's meant to mimic a 50cc or 80cc two-stroke. Is that right?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
50cc.
So
continue.
Yeah, so rocked up to the paddock. Now, it's as good as it is. You have to take a petrol generator with you to the track to start up, and then charge the battery in between motos, which, that kind of defeats the object a little bit.
Yeah.
And although both my boys preferred the electric bike, which I'm a little bit ashamed to say, it was easier to ride. The throttle was easier. Just the whole from throttle to rear wheel, the connection of that particular bike against the 50 is so superior.
Right.
But yeah, I think there's definitely an element of the people wanting the noise, the smell. I mean, especially motocross, the smell and the noise out of any sport, out of any motorcycle racing genre, motocross has it all, doesn't it? So I can see why that perhaps is the most tribal. It is tribal, I guess.
But you look at somebody like your kids, right? Like a completely new generation. Like, how did they feel? Did they get off of it and be like, "Dad, get this out of here"? Like, I can't handle the bullies, and like I'm not riding this anymore. Or were they more accepting of it? But they it was the people around them. How did they view it?
They're definitely more accepting of it. I think with the way the world is and what they're taught in school, what they see on social media, what they see on the news, then there's definitely there's the devil's there, which is which is the activists and everyone saying, oh, you must stop this, but then there's another voice on this side going, no, go on, you can, the smell, the noise, the sound, everything. It's just
it's their dad calling them all kinds of horrible names for riding an electric motorcycle. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that's a good point, right? That the kids of a certain age would not be, they haven't soaked up enough of the culture yet, and they've ridden the bike, and they're like, wow, it's cool, it's great. I don't see the problem, And plus, like you said, they're growing up in a different world, and their parents or their maybe at the very least their friends' parents are driving electric cars. It's like it's much more normal than it was, I guess, when we were kids. That's fascinating though. I don't think I really have anything else to say about the culture of electric motorcycles in England. It's a fascinating snapshot to get from you that people are.
I'm very surprised.
It's so interesting. I think oftentimes in the United States, Europe, it can be viewed sometimes as like the future a little bit, like the problems that Europe's dealing with, sometimes they deal with them sooner than we do in America. And, wherever gas is more expensive. So it's a slightly different snapshot of global society. And sometimes I think am guilty of assuming that people would just be more progressive, but evidently that's not the case when it comes to electric dirt bikes.
No way.
That's fascinating. All right, so the next episode on our list here, episode 9, we interviewed a young lady by the name of Doodle on a Motorcycle, has a YouTube channel. We talked to her about traveling solo as a female, getting into motorcycling, yada, yada, yada. We're not going to ask you about her specifically. We figured a good pivot here would be to ask you if you have any specific motorcycle content that you enjoy watching. Do you consume any motorcycle media that you enjoy and would recommend to people, or are you like Spurge and I, and you only ever really produce it and don't pay attention to what other people?
Well, that's not true. We watch ourselves all the time. Like we just
we watch every episode of High Side Low Side on YouTube.
I think most of the time, as you guys know, this job is it's not a 9 to 5, and particularly for us, we edit and all our stuff all the stuff post-production is us, so I don't have a lot of time, and I'll be brutally honest, I don't watch a lot of other stuff on YouTube. However, I do love Billy Bolt. I don't know if you guys know Billy Bolt.
I don't think so. Billy Bolt?
No? Yeah.
Okay.
So Billy Bolt
not familiar.
Is a world super enduro and hard enduro champion.
Okay.
And Tommy Searle, British motocross rider.
Mm-hmm. I've heard of him.
Yeah, so Tommy and Billy are my two sort of. I guess I can watch it with the kids as well, and it's good. They're not exactly family friendly, but the kids love it as well. So bottom line is I don't really watch that much anymore, which is a crime shame, but it's purely time.
Sure. No, that's totally fair. We don't need to belabor the point. We struggle with the same thing sometimes.
I'm looking up Billy Bolt's YouTube channel though as we speak. It looks like
well, that's at the very least it'll give us
content.
some inspiration to try. So the next episode on our list was called Motorcycles You Should Know. It was the beginning of, again, hopefully a serialized conversation that we have about motorcycles over the course of history. That if perhaps mostly if you're new to motorcycling. We would recommend that you kind of like understand, or we discussed, we talked about I don't know, what did we talk about? We talked about like the first Triumph Speed Twin. We talked about the first Harley Sportster. We talked about the Yamaha MT-09.
The Honda Cub, and
Talked about
really
the Honda
what
Cub.
that did for
So bikes that sort of like shifted the perception of motorcycling in the world, or they were sort of like a rockin' success for some reason. You mentioned the Suzuki SV650 as sort of like one of the best bikes ever made, so. Maybe aside from the SV, or you can talk about the SV as well if you like. Do you have a motorcycle that you'd like to pass along to our audience as a motorcycle that they should know and they should understand, and then a quick explanation of why it was important?
I mean, from a personal point of view, the PW50.
Nice.
How many careers has that bike ignited? I think hands down that bike has had more bums on seats, more future champions, more, I'm not just talking about motocrosses, road races,
right?
People who learn bikes. That bike has that's a bit enthusiastic perhaps, but that bike has done so much for the world of motorcycling, and it gets no credit. Doesn't get a mention.
Well, you're really plucking at our heartstrings here at Revzilla, because we featured the PW50 in a special print magazine thing that we produced a couple years ago. We hired a freelancer to write about it. We produced a short film about the PW50. There's a long article on our website about the PW50, and it's all to do with this exact thing you're talking about how like whatever, Ricky Carmichael, Mark Marquez, you name it, these people all started on a PW50.
So
Great minds.
Brett Smith, who runs, is it We Were Fast?
We Went Fast,
We
I
Went
believe.
Fast.
Yeah. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Brett Smith.
No.
But he writes a lot of really interesting, in-depth pieces. A lot of stuff about off-road and motocross specifically. But he's an intelligent guy and writes interesting scripts and articles about that kind of thing.
So he had done the article for us, and then we had produced a film with him called The Little Giant, the PW50 story, which was basically him talking about, not so much even his past and how he used a PW50 to get into racing, but then how he found and restored a PW50 for his daughter, and got his daughter into going out and racing with it as well. So kind of a generational tale, which I think it kind of speaks to what you're talking about with the everlasting effect that this bike has had.
Did your kids start on a PW50 as well?
Yeah.
Al?
Yeah. So the bike that I had when I was 3 is exactly the same bike that they rode when they were that kind of age. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, still got it. Still the most sentimental piece of anything that I own is that bike is just worth more than anything sentimentally than anything else I own. So
wedding photos, children, whatever.
yeah.
Is that the one bike in the stable that you would never let go?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think just to quickly mention it, I think a lot of people will go, oh yeah, PW50, but for those road riders, for those who will come into motorcycling motorcycling either late or just from a road-based background, most of them, and I don't know whether it's like this in the US as well, but a lot of guys over in Europe will have no idea or have very little idea what the Pee-wee is and just how much of an impact it's had. So
right.
I guess that's trying to justify why I said the Pee-wee. So yeah.
No, I think it's had everlasting effect regardless of where you're from, because it's definitely been a monumental bike for, I think, the American audience as well.
Yeah. I think that, and to your point, it's when you hear that some motocross or supercross stars started on a PW50, you think, oh, like a little dirt bike, sure. But yeah, one of the things the article touched on was that Mark Marquez and Casey Stoner and Jorge Lorenzo, like these MotoGP world champions, have a history with the PW50 as well, which is is pretty phenomenal. So that's a great call out. I like it, and it's a bike that we now don't have to cover in future episodes of bikes that you should know, because we can reference this episode and we can say we'll let Al Fagan tell you why it's important.
There you go.
Great.
So we're gonna wrap things up here before we get into the Rev Trivia game. So for our audience, we are gonna play a round of Rev Trivia with Al here. But episode 11 is our high side, low side comments episode. And what we did we actually had set aside a comment from an emailer who wrote in. His name is Andrew. And we saved this one specifically for you because, especially as you were talking about earlier in the episode about your favorite sport bikes, you mentioned the RSV4, you mentioned the Panigale, you mentioned how, these are bikes that are really speaking to you more so than some of the Japanese counterpoints at this point in time. Andrew wrote in, and I'm going to abbreviate some of this, and he goes, I think you guys were too generous with your take on modern European motorcycles. We had done an episode where we talked about historical blunders from the European manufacturers, and Andrew feels that we were too easy on European manufacturers. He says that he's been in the market for a Triumph Scrambler, but the long-term reviews are split evenly between love and hate. Hate has to do a lot with glitches and mechanical issues. He feels the same way about dual sports. He hears us talk about, KTMs and Huskies on this program, and he's like, no, I'm going to go back to Japanese manufacturers because, these European manufacturers, while they might be outperforming in some regards, are doing it by sacrificing reliability. He talks about how he purchased an Africa Twin, but before that, he had wanted a BMW F850 GSA. But he watched a guy, no name, doing a review on a brand new one and found that it had an oil leak. Some other people commented in that their experience was oil leaks. So really, he kind of throws it at us and he goes, now maybe you're going to say that this is all anecdotal and someone just got a lemon. But his rebuttal would be that you just don't see negative reviews about Japanese motorcycles and reliability issues. While he understands some of the complaints about Honda being too vanilla, he's focused on quality concerns over performance concerns. And what are your thoughts on this? I know when Zack and I pulled this comment down, as owners of some European manufacturers ourselves, we had some strong comments, but we want to start with you. For Andrew, who wrote in saying that you should choose Japanese over European because they're still the masters of reliability, how do you feel about that?
I mean, he's got a good point. I particularly I picked up on the fact that he said, that the performance and excitement is sometimes, or is now, taking precedent to reliability. And I wouldn't agree with that necessarily, but the bikes that I mentioned earlier, as you mentioned, the Aprilia, the Ducati, all these bikes, without doubt, anyone with a beating heart will find them more exciting than an inline four. It's pretty safe to say. The thing is, so BMW is probably one of the most popular on the back of a pickup truck, recovery truck in Europe. Maybe it's the same for the US. But the thing that
just BMW in general, or a specific in general? Okay.
Yeah. But the thing that BMW does so well is the aftermarket. If it takes, Mr. Smith to have a loan bike for 2 months while the other one's being repaired, or picked up from France and recovered back to England, they'll do it. And I think that a lot of the after sales and the customer care goes a long way to appeasing to pleasing customers. So, and I agree, the Ducati, the KTMs, they are also, I guess, on the recovery truck more than you see a Honda or a Yamaha or anything else. And I haven't seen any stats. It's just a case of what you hear and from various people and what you read on the internet, etc., what you watch. So, yeah, I guess I can't really argue with that. What was his name?
Andrew.
I can't really argue with what he's saying.
It's interesting because when I think of BMW, I think of Zack and I were on a recent trip overseas, and we had ran into a gentleman on, I believe it was an R1150 GS. I don't even know if it was an R1200. And he had 250,000 kilometers on his bike. He was riding it from France to India and back. And I guess for me, when I think about the BMW Boxer specifically, I guess I think of that as more reliability. I think of, guys and gals having hundreds of thousands of kilometers, or if not miles, on those bikes. So I guess I've never really experienced the BMW on the back of the recovery truck. But Zach, I know your family history with BMW might be a little bit different if you find that they are a little bit less reliable.
I mean, I don't know. My dad he's into old BMWs, which I don't know if that really makes
Counts.
it any better.
Yeah.
I think he likes old airhead BMWs because he can fix them because they're carbureted and they have points and he doesn't need to take them to a dealer, right? And he's ridden an airhead BMW from thousands of miles from the Northeast United States down to Central America and back, and did stuff break? Yeah, certainly. But would it have broken if it was a 40-year-old Honda? Probably. Also that. I don't. Yeah. I think that's maybe too specific a point. But what I think is interesting about your commentary, Al, is maybe that you feel like, first of all, BMW, for example, does a good job in combating that, right? Saying
yes.
Yeah, sure,
Yes.
no problem. This is a thing that might be an issue, but we're just going to meet it head on, and we're going to do whatever we need to do to convince you that this ownership experience is still good.
Yes.
I guess that if I'm reading between the lines of what you're saying, or some of your commentary, you, for example, what's his toes earlier, Sean, was it, who asked about the track bike thing, and you recommended the Street Triple. You did that sort of without hesitation. You weren't thinking I better recommend Suzuki GSX-S 750 or GSX-S 1000, even though it's not nearly as good a bike, but because it's Japanese and it'll be reliable, and Sean will appreciate that. So do you feel like, sure, maybe European, there's a Euro tax or sort of like a bit of a life tax with European motorcycles that they might be less reliable, but to you it's part and parcel, it's worth it? It's
exactly.
You just live your life, that's part of motorcycling, and who cares?
Yeah. That's pretty much, you just pretty much summed it. Yeah.
Okay.
Although going back to the journalist thing, I'm not spending $25,000 on a bike. So, but it's just, just from what you pick up and what you understand. And on the flip side, KTM just again, this is just from experience over here, they get a bit, and Ducati, I guess, get a bit of a bad rep because they're not as forthcoming or as generous, you could say, with the after-sales stuff as BMW.
Interesting.
And I think, like I said, BMW do a good job of polishing over cracks, whereas the other manufacturers, Triumph is the same. I'm literally listing all the European manufacturers now because, again, I have no numbers in front of me. I have no facts. I have no hard figures. It's just purely what I know and understand. And yeah, the likes of Triumph, BMW, Ducati, KTM, and Aprilia gets a bad rap because although Piaggio is a massive company, Aprilia is tiny, and the sales, dealers in not necessarily Italy, but Europe and particularly England are so small. They have no budgets, so they get a bad rap.
Yeah, I think that hits on something. To Andrew's point, he talks about maybe some of this is anecdotal. And I've with my own money bought a KTM 1090. I've bought a Triumph Tiger 800. I still own an older Triumph Bonneville from 2005 with 80,000 miles on it, and I've found that those bikes have been wildly dependable. Now, maybe I got a good one and someone else got a bad one. Maybe there's something there. But the main difference was, and I remember this with the first trip I took on the Bonneville, you don't have the same dealer support, right? So if something does go wrong and you don't have an Aprilia dealership in your town or the town that you're passing through, chances are there's a Honda dealership there, and maybe they're just selling Honda generators, but they can probably get you the parts that you need if that's the case or something like that. So I do think that and especially from an American standpoint, we've seen such a dealership penetration with the Japanese manufacturers that we haven't seen necessarily with the European manufacturers. I think some of that's getting better, but I don't think that we've had the same dealership network in America the way that we've had with the Japanese.
Yeah.
No, 100% agree, yeah.
So there you have it. What's your name? Andrew. Yes. Anecdotally, they're less reliable, but they're also more fun. So you choose what you want to do with your life. All right. Well, that wraps up all the topics we want to talk about. Just one more thing we want to squeeze out of you, Al, and that's to play this Rev Trivia game. We're going to play an engine sound.
I'm feeling the pressure.
I know. Yeah. It's very, again, we told you this pre-show. We'll say it again. Spurgeon and I are unaware of what this engine is. And as you will see, we will almost certainly be fantastically poor at this game, even though we invented it. So don't worry about how good or bad your guesses are. Just have fun with the journey.
Okay.
And don't worry about all the people that are going to call you out in the comments section of the video and just say, I can't believe he didn't get it. Just put that out of your mind for right now.
If it makes you feel better, nobody listens to this podcast. So no one's going to hear any of this. Don't worry. Okay. So without further ado, please do fire up that link with the engine sound, and let's each one of the three of us in our 3 different time zones here give 30 seconds here to listen to this engine sound, and those of you playing at home, shout it out if you know it.
I got it.
He's got it,
Wow.
everybody.
He's got it.
I've got it.
Go
What do you
ahead.
got?
Give it to us.
Yeah.
That is a Honda Fireblade.
Okay, give us a little bit more.
Yeah.
So that's a CBR 1000, right?
Sorry, yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. CBR 1000 RR with a loud exhaust on.
Okay. And what year?
I don't think in the history of us playing this game with a guest, I don't think we've ever come back from listening to it the first time and had someone say,
Such
"I've got
confidence.
it."
I
Yeah.
know. The whole thing about I'm feeling nervous, I'm not sure. And then he's like, I know what it is. You guys, I got it.
Let's play this one more time for the audience. Let's play the sound one more time for the audience.
Okay, sounds good.
Can I? I'm gonna go 2008.
Okay. So, okay. All right. So yeah, talk us through what you're hearing. Why do you think that? Are you hearing it's like fuel pump noise? Is it a starter motor noise? Is it?
It's the little bit of a fuel pump, but it's that struggle. It's that struggle on the button. It's that
With the first turnover, the
CBR,
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's it. It's got. I'm going to be really gutted if it's not.
No, okay. So here's what we're gonna do.
I love
So
it.
you are very sure we're gonna pull the first hint up. So the first hint for the audience at home is inline 4-cylinder
Wow.
engine. So
Right.
that's up the same alley
It is.
of what Al's thinking here. Zach, did you want to add anything in?
Well, I just wanted to put it to you. Al's very confident here with his guess. Do you have any? You feeling any? You hearing anything?
My guess was
Spurs?
just an inline 4. I was not nearly as confident as Al is, outside of the fact that I was hearing an inline 4. What about yourself, Zachary?
Well, initially, the way the engine was running and the way that it was revving, I thought it might be older than 2008. But then, of course, you can hear the way the key snaps, the way you can hear the fuel pump running. It's obviously it's not carbureted. It's not actually like an old inline 4. The aftermarket exhaust always throws me for a loop, right? It's clearly not a stock exhaust, and that always you hear a little bit more a guttural sort of sound from the engine. It makes it a little tricky. The bottom line is here, no, I can't be more specific than Alice. And I like his note on the starter motor. The little struggle from the starter motor. It sounds like a Honda.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't I could just say GSXR 1000 to be contrarian, but I don't have anything better than that. So I say we chase it.
Hint number 2. Introduced in 2004.
Okay.
Okay. Is that when the CBR 1000 was introduced, as far as you understand it, Al? It was.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you go to the launch?
I didn't. I just came in. I went to the launch of the 2008 model in Qatar. So that was the end of 2007. Yeah.
Maybe they were
Gotcha.
upset because you were critiquing the sound of their starting motor. They're like, that guy says that our starter motor struggles too
He obviously
much.
has not critiqued it enough.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
What's
The answer for our audience, it is a 2018 Honda CBR 1000
18.
RR.
wow?
18.
Okay.
Wow.
Interesting. Well, still, I just like to round of applause for you.
That's the best.
very
That's the best we've
impressive.
ever done.
Yeah, very
Wow.
impressive.
Wow.
Shout out to Colin, who sent in this clip for us. Colin has a 2018 Honda CBR 1000 RR. The exhaust that you're hearing is a Project SC CRT slip-on exhaust. And just a call out there to anybody that wants to play along. You can send us a clip of your motorcycle to highside, at revzilla.com. We need the year, the make, the model, any modifications that you've done. And much like Colin did, you need to start off with a clip of the bike starting up, let it idle for a little bit, give us a couple of good revs, and your bike might make it onto the engine sound guessing game.
I would also just like,
Absolutely.
I would like to call out Colin also. Nice, good Rev Trivia clip there. Nice, gentle idle at first, some low revs, some high revs. Let us hear the whole thing. You know, like you don't have to try to baffle us. It's hard enough as it is.
That was the full
Not
experience.
if you're
was it?
Al though. I mean, that right out of the gate knew exactly what it was.
Very
Crazy.
impressive.
Yeah.
Are you a little disappointed that you were 10 years off on the guess?
I am. Although I'm 90% sure that most of the internals involved in that starting procedure haven't changed since 2008. So it could have been anything from 2008 to the most recent CBR 1000 RR.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we
I
are
think-
certainly willing to give you some slack. That's
Yeah.
the name of our game.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Just listening to that starter motor and twigging the bike is very impressive. And I would say overall, Spurge, you can disagree if you like. This has been an impressive showing by Mr. Al Fagan in general. I would say fantastic podcast guest. I think you can put it on your resume. If you'd like a reference, just let us know.
Oh, thank you guys. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks
I
so
think
much.
it was especially interesting just to learn, from someone that's doing, the kind of work that we've seen, ourselves doing on this side of the pond, but just some of the cultural differences that I found, that I learned from this episode was super interesting, and I'm sure that our audience will feel the same.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
I'm
thanks very much
certainly
for
not
hanging
coming
out.
to ride an electric bike in England anytime soon. I'll tell you
That's
that
a
much.
good note. Yeah, if you get one takeaway, don't bring your electric
Yeah.
dirt bike to a motocross track in England. Otherwise, someone will purchase a firearm just to
Yeah.
to shoot you. Well, yeah, thanks so much for hanging out, Al. We really appreciate it. We hope we can find an excuse to get you back on the podcast sometime. And as you mentioned, actually, that it is not a 9-to-5 job. I was just looking at the clock, and I believe it's almost 7 p.m. your time now. So we
Yes, it
appreciate
is.
you going
Yeah.
outside the 9-to-5 hours for us
No
specifically.
worries. Thanks for having me, guys. Really appreciate it. Cheers.
Cheers.
Right on.
So special thanks to Alastair again for joining us for the program. If you're
Yes.
not familiar with his work, make sure you check out 44 Teeth. Like I said, there's a website. There's also a YouTube channel. Make sure you're subscribing over there. Their motorcycle content is hilariously funny as well as in depth.
They have fun doing it, that's for sure. And yeah, great conversation with old Al Fagan. It's he's always a good guy to chat to at press launches and when our paths cross via work. But it's fun to be able to share some of his insight and yeah, it's always I get such a kick out of talking to people who are based in a different place in motorcycling, whether it's in this country and they have their nose in a different part of the industry, or Al who's like doing largely the same work that we do, Spurge, but he's doing it in a different place and at a different cadence and with a slightly different outlook. It's just super interesting to get his perspective on stuff. So I had a blast.
I agree. Yeah, I think from a cultural standpoint, it's always nice because I feel like we walk away learning something.
Absolutely.
when we do these episodes.
Yeah, I had no idea the whole 3-wheeler. Like if you're riding a Nikon, you're gonna get body slammed. I just didn't know it. But now we learned something. Okay, so the time has come for us to give away the final T-shirt of season 7. It's an exciting time, as always, to give away a T-shirt. As a reminder, the way that you can win a high side, low side T-shirt is to leave a review on Apple Podcasts. That helps with the distribution of our show, and it also helps us with some feedback. If you would like the show to be different or, better, worse, longer, shorter, you can let us know. And we'll choose a review that we get a kick out of, and we'll give away a t-shirt. And if your review does not get picked, friendly reminder, you can also win a t-shirt by going into the website and buying one.
There you go. You can win with your credit card, people.
So this time around, our winner is, drumroll please, Sand and Surf. Sand and Surf wrote in to say, I love listening to you guys while I sit on my Kawasaki-powered zero-turn mower while pissing off the neighbors by refusing to mow in straight lines. So Sand and Surf is a bit of a rebel when it comes to mowing their lawn. Goes on to say that when mowing their lawn, they take big, wide, sweeping turns to make it feel like I'm roosting around a berm on the Husky. Sand and Surf would like our episodes to be longer. No promises there. Specifically requests 2 hours and 45 minutes is what I need to get 5 acres done. And I hate making a pit stop to search for another podcast. So bottom line here, Spurge, very flattering review in so much as I wish your podcast was longer because I like to mow my lawn like a drunk person and I got 5 acres to do. So please make your podcast longer.
I think Sand and Surf, you're just going to have to learn how to ride that mower faster. I don't think we can make a longer podcast, but I think you're just going to have to put the pedal down a little bit more and just keep going after those neighbors.
I think this podcast will probably, I'm not sure where we're at with timing here, but it feels like this is going to be a long one. So hopefully this helps you get your mowing done in the way that you want to, Sand and Surf. But thank you so much for your review. It made us chuckle thinking about you weaving around your 5 acres on your mower. And please do remember to send your t-shirt size and preferred mailing address to highsidelowside@revzilla.com, and we'll send you off some new threads.
I don't know if you've ever seen those, like the lawnmowers that you pull behind like a tractor or something like that. I wonder if he could hook up lawnmower to the back of a Husky and, just have things go horribly awry.
That sounds like a CTXP episode if I've ever heard one. Motorcycle lawnmowers. Yeah. All right. Well, that pretty much does it, Spurge. We talked about not the news. We brought a guest from another country, for crying out loud. We had a discussion all about season 7, and this being episode 12, the finale of season 7, it does feel appropriate to remind people one more time to send in engine sounds to highsidelowside@revzilla.com. Any commentary, fan mail, photos of yourself wearing your High Side Low Side t-shirt, whatever, we'll take it all. Feel free to send that to highsidelowside@revzilla.com. Engine sounds, flattery,
we want it all. Send it all.
Yeah. Send it all. Yeah. And of course, please leave some reviews on the Apple Podcast platform. We like seeing those in there, and it'll be your chance to win a t-shirt. Plus, this is the last episode for another few months when we take a break between seasons. So we'll be excited to dive into it when we come back around.
Yeah. I think as we look back on season 7, from a little bit of a navel-gazing perspective, it's been the most popular season that we've done to date from a download perspective. And it's awesome. It's always humbling. I think when Zach and I started, putting this together and feeling our way through our union, if you will, it was definitely there were some moments where it was high and low sided for sure. And not that we have it all figured out. Like I said, we still read all those comments that come through. We're always trying to improve. But as we wrap up another season of doing this, it's been a hoot. It's been a lot of fun. Thanks to Motul, thanks to Revzilla for allowing us to continue to do this from a sponsorship standpoint, but also from just a general support standpoint of allowing Zach and I to say the crazy stuff that comes to our mind at times.
Right. And yeah, most of all, thanks to you, listener. Appreciate you listening to us jabber about bikes. We really hope that you take something away, a few laughs, a little bit of knowledge, hopefully, over the course of each episode and each season. We so appreciate you tuning in and sharing it and doing whatever you're doing, because High Side, Low Side is, despite our best efforts, a success. So thank you very much for all that you do and your listenage. So I guess it's time for one last takeaway moment. Spurge, I guess it could be anything from season 7 or it could be from episode 12. What do you got? You got You got any ruminations flying around in that head of yours?
Well, it kind of, just piggybacking off what you just said, I do think, I like to think of High Side, Low Side as, not just a podcast from Zack and I, but also a podcast that the listeners are part of. I think whether it's the comments or the reviews that we get to read, this definitely feels more like a community affair than just Zack and I leading it. I know a lot of the topics that we come up with sometimes are from audience members being thrown out to us.
Absolutely true. Yeah.
So I think it's been really fun for us to watch this grow into something that is much more than just ourselves. Specifically to this episode, I had no idea that electric motorcycles were so controversial in
good word
in England. I was not expecting that answer from Al.
I know, very surprising. And if you're in England and you have any anecdotes about how much you hate electric bikes, please send us an email, highsidelowside@revzilla.com. We'd love to hear about it. If you have, if you disagree with Al, hard to imagine that you would, but if you do, we'd like to hear your perspective as well. That's a fascinating turn for that conversation to take. I wasn't expecting that either.
Yeah.
I think my takeaway from episode 12, just a quick piece of vocab there. I'm not sure if anyone caught it, but Al said that when they did the Can-Am Spider launch in Portugal, they rode like absolute Muppets. Did you catch that?
I did. Yeah.
Okay. And I like a lot of the sort of like British English slang words. I think it's fun that they use different words to describe different things. Muppet is a fun one. In case you heard him say that he rode like a Muppet and you didn't understand it through the context, that's like a he basically meant we're riding like idiots, riding like idiots. I don't know, riding like fools, I suppose.
Who was was it Animal? Animal. There was like the drummer for like the Muppets. That's what I pictured. Like I just pictured like somebody going crazy and being ridiculous.
Ah!
Yeah. That's kind of what came to mind for me.
Anyway, fun piece of vocab from our buddy Al over in England. So thanks for that.
Also, if you didn't know it before this episode, a Reliant Robin is a 3-wheeled car that was manufactured in England from 73 to 81.
We are just doling out knowledge left, right, and center here on High Side, Low Side. Yeah. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for another episode, and thank you for another season. We so appreciate again how dedicated you listeners are. We hope that you'll share this episode among others with your friends, and yeah, we'll be back in another few months with another season. God willing, the boat don't sink.
We'll see you for season 8 sooner than later, people.
See ya.